A group of 5 friends decides to spend the weekend in a remote national park, where tourists rarely visit. Their goal is to disconnect from social media, test themselves for survival and relieve stress before the start of the school year. Among them, Michael, a fan of extreme hiking, organizer. Laura, his girlfriend, is a blogger looking for real adventures for content. Jake, ex-military, secretive and taciturn. Emily, Laura's friend, who suffers from anxiety but is trying to prove to herself that she can handle it. Chris, Emily's young brother, is on a camping trip for the first time. The trip begins with minor troubles: GPS failure, strange footprints on the trail, fragments of police tape in the trees. A local ranger, met at the entrance, warns them that the last 2 groups of tourists have not returned, but Michael waves them off. He just wants to scare the newcomers. At night, while they are camping, Chris finds a torn backpack under a bush. Inside are photographs of strangers, a notebook filled with dates and coordinates, and a map of the park, where an area 5 miles from their camp is marked in red. Jake, after reviewing the recordings, frowns. These are not tourist markers. Someone was watching those who were here. Laura laughs. Maybe it's geocaching, but Emily notices that one of the photos in the backpack shows their own tent, taken this morning. Meanwhile, Michael discovers that their food is scattered over the bushes, and there are knife punctures in the canned food. Someone had obviously tried to spoil their supplies, but they hadn't stolen anything. When Jake inspects the perimeter, he finds a wire trap, almost invisible in the grass, the one used to catch deer. Except that the wire was stretched at the level of a human neck. By midnight, the group decides not to light a bonfire, so as not to attract attention. Laura, despite her fears, goes into the woods with a camera. Here is the perfect shot for stories. In 10 minutes they would hear her scream. Rushing to search, her friends find her phone lying in the mud. There is a recording on the screen. Laura is running in panic. Heavy footsteps and male laughter can be heard off screen. The recording ends when something throws her to the ground. Jake takes the lead. We are divided into 2 groups. Michael and Chris, stay here, guard the camp. Emily and I are going to look for Laura. But while they are preparing, there is a crunching of branches from the darkness. Chris, thinking it's Laura, runs forward and falls into a hole disguised by leaves. At the bottom are sharp stakes made of burnt metal. The boy dies instantly. The panic is growing. Jake discovers that their radios are dead, the antennas are broken. Emily, sobbing, clings to Michael. We need to leave now. But Michael refuses to leave Laura. While they are arguing, Laura's voice comes from the forest. Help! He's here. Rushing towards the sound, they see her tied to a tree. His mouth is taped shut, and he wears a timer collar around his neck. As Jake gets closer, he notices wires running from the collar to the branches. It's an explosive. Get back, he shouts, but Michael is already rushing to the girl. The timer stops at 0:05. Laura is twitching hysterically, the wires are straining. Suddenly, a flashlight tied to a nearby tree is activated. Its beam highlights a figure in camouflage standing 20 meters away. A man holds a remote control in his hands. Jake rushes in his direction, but the ground falls through under his feet. This is another pit trap. The soldier manages to grab the edge, but the stranger approaches, stepping on his toes with his boot. Emily, left with Michael, hears a click. The timer on Laura's collar is activated again. 0:04, 0:03. The timer on Laura's neck freezes at 0:02. Michael, ignoring Jake's scream, rushes to her, but Emily grabs his sleeve. He wants you to come over. It's a trap. Her voice breaks, but there's a clear desperation in her eyes. Michael pulls away, but at that moment Laura jerks her head sharply, and the wires tied to the collar snap. There is no explosion, Instead, a metal cage pops out of the ground, slamming shut around Michael. This, a trap? He furiously hits the bars, but the design is designed for a bear. Laura, still tied to the tree, lets out a muffled moan. Emily runs up to her and rips off the tape. He's everywhere. Laura gasps, panting. Cameras in the trees. He's watching us. Like in a game. Meanwhile, Jake is hanging over the pit, his fingers sliding on the wet ground. A stranger in camouflage crouches in front of him, and the light of the lantern catches his face, weathered, with a scar through his left eye. "Did you think I was a hero?" he croaks, pulling out a knife. But before the blade touches Jake's hand, a deer flies out of the bushes, startled by the screams. The animal kicks with its hoof, and the man loses his balance. Jake uses the moment to pull himself up and roll out onto the edge of the pit. At the camp, Emily finds a multi-tool in Chris' backpack. As she tries to open Michael's cage, Laura trembles, repeating, "He said it. He said we'd ruin his forest. That we're trash." Suddenly, a voice comes from the speaker on the collar. "The rules are simple. One will survive. Choose one." Jake returns and inspects the cage, a lock with a timer. "It will explode in 10 minutes if you don't enter the code." On the inside of the bars is an engraving, "Ask those who came before you." Emily remembers the notebook from her backpack. He flips through it. On the last page is written in blood. He takes what was left. "Our stuff," Laura shouts. He steals objects and uses them against the next ones. Michael grabs his backpack. There is no flask inside. Jake checks the pit where Chris died. A military identification badge sticks out among the stakes. "Oh my God. This is an old colleague of mine. His group disappeared 6 months ago." A stranger is watching them from a hill, his binoculars glistening in the moonlight. He puts a whistle to his lips, and the sharp sound deafens the band. A roar comes from the forest. Something huge breaks the bushes, heading towards the camp. Michael's cage starts ticking louder. Jake, torn between saving his friend and the threat from the hill, throws Emily a notebook. "Look for a pattern in the numbers." Laura, still tied up, shouts, "Deer trails." He's following their routes. A wobbly bear comes out of the darkness, attracted by the smell of scattered food. His eyes sparkle with hunger. The stranger laughs, the bear growls, approaching the camp. His front paw is covered in blood. Apparently, he has already fallen into one of the stranger's traps. Jake grabs a torch from the campfire, lights it on the embers and throws it towards the beast. The fire hisses, falling into a puddle of spilled alcohol from Michael's broken flask. A blue flame bursts out, blocking the bear's path. "Emily, hurry up!" Jake shouts, shielding her from the beast. "Look for the connection between the dates in the notebook and the coordinates on the map." Emily is frantically flipping through the pages. Her fingers are trembling, but suddenly she freezes. All dates are the days when the groups disappeared. And the coordinates. She points at the map. These are the places of their last stops. Our camp is the next point. Michael sees the bear walking around the fire from the cage. "Jake!" On the right. The soldier turns around, grabs an axe and throws it at the beast. The blade plunges into the tree, distracting the bear. Laura tears a page out of her notebook. "Look, the last digits of the coordinates are 7, 12, 9. These are letters. G, L, I. Glitch." Emily exhales. "Enter G, L, I. But how? Letters and the numbers." Michael rips the G7 badge off his neck. "Jake, check the radio. Frequency 7, 12, 9. Jake grabs the broken radio, enters the frequency. There is a click and the cage opens. Michael rolls out, grabs a bloody axe made of wood. The bear, enraged by the noise, breaks through the fire. Jake pushes Emily aside, taking the hit himself. Claws tear his jacket, but the former soldier manages to stick a knife into the beast's paw. The bear retreats, dragging the tense awning with him, which covers him like a net. "Run!" Michael shouts, picking up the wounded Jake. "To the stream. You can lose track of him there." The group rushes through the thicket. Laura stumbles over the wire, there is a click, and a trap cage falls from the tree, but Emily pulls it away at the last moment. A bear roars and twigs crackle from behind. Jake stops at a stream, surveying the area. "Here. In 2009, the family disappeared." He points to a faded ribbon on the stone. "A stranger uses old tragedies as a script. So he's here somewhere." Michael peers into the darkness. Shoots everything on camera. Laura suddenly notices movement in the water. Beneath the surface of the stream are wires leading to speakers suspended from trees. It's all staged. He guides us as characters. There is a crunching of branches. A stranger comes out from behind a boulder. He has a shotgun in his hands, but the barrel is lowered. "You lasted the longest," his voice sounds like the creak of unoiled hinges. But there is always one ending. Jake takes a step forward, shielding his friends. "Only one survives, right? So it's going to be you." He throws the knife into the ground at the stranger's feet. "Take it and leave." The man freezes, then slowly raises the gun. It's too late for. A gunshot interrupts his speech. The bullet hits the speaker above the stranger's head. This is fired by Emily, who found a signal pistol in Chris' backpack. The sparks ignite the dry needles, and the fire spreads quickly through the trees. The stranger, engulfed in flames, runs to the stream, but falls, entangled in his own wires. The group retreats while the forest turns into hell. An hour later, they go out onto the road, where a patrol finds them. Jake loses consciousness from blood loss. Laura holds a camera in her hands, everything is recorded. But when they open the stranger's backpack, found by the stream, there are passports inside, with their photos. Emily snatches the passport from Laura's hands. Her photo is smiling under the plastic wrap, but the date of birth has been changed. Date of death, 23.10.2023. Today's date. All documents are perfect forgeries, including stamps of border control of non-existent countries. He's been preparing for years. Jake flips through Michael's passport. There are notes about trips to places where we have never been. A bear roars from the burning forest. Smoke covers the sky. Laura notices movement in the bushes. It's a deer with a camera on its collar. She hits the technician with a rock, but a stranger's voice comes out of the speaker, now distorted by pain. You've ruined everything. I was creating the perfect story." "What story?" Michael yells, raising the bloody axe. "What are we, dolls?" "Chronicles," a hoarse voice. "Each group is the head. You, the chapter of betrayal." Emily suddenly remembers, a week before the hike, Jake strongly advised her to change the location. "You knew. You led us here." She steps back from the wounded man. Jake is silent, clutching his bloody side. Laura checks the camera. On the last recording, when they were running from the bear, Jake flashes in the corner of the frame, putting a bundle in the bushes. She enlarges the image. This is Michael's flask. You set up a GPS malfunction." Michael grabs Jake by the collar. "Why?" "He promised to bring her back." Jake is coughing up blood. "My sister. Her group disappeared here 2 years ago. He said he would show you where the bodies were." A stranger, a survivor of the fire, crawls out from behind a rock. His face is charred, but he's laughing, holding a child's shoe in his hands. "She's been calling for you for a long time, James." "Jake, James?" He growls, showing emotion for the first time. It turns out that 2 years ago he changed his name after being discharged from the army. His sister is the only one who knew about his involvement in classified operations in the area. "You killed her." Jake rushes at the stranger, but he presses a button on the remote. The ground under the group collapses. They fall into an underground bunker. A damp concrete room. There are hundreds of photos on the walls, previous victims, their last moments. In the center is a table with diaries, where a stranger has been describing experiments for decades, how to make people betray each other. "There's no way out," a voice sounds from the speakers. "But there is a choice, who will be the main character of my book?" There is a pistol with one cartridge on the table. "The lock on the door will open in an hour." The inscription